Today we are going to do one of the scariest things a mini painter can face, and that is highlighting an airbrush surface with a base layer consistency. But fear not, because Papa Laborts will show you how it's done. Okay, learning from my experience with the previous abomination, now I'm going to use the airbrush. See, I made a promise to use my brain more often, and I'm sticking to it, like a granny's bedsheets to her back. Now, this abomination has an even more desaturated palette as the previous one, which I'm not super thrilled about, but the heroes of this box, thankfully, are very colorful compared to the core box heroes, which is awesome. I really like some nice colors every now and then, but this guy lacks that, so we need to accept that if we want to paint something that follows the illustration of him. Having said that, I will push him to a more greenish look, but if you want to stay closer to the illustration of this guy, switch out the green to Dumble Brown and you're good to go. I start with Deathward Forest and apply it with the airbrush. A couple drops of thinner goes in first, like you let Granny in first in the doorway, because you're a gentleman, and then add some paint. My usual method is to have nice coverage. I add the same amount of drops as the brush full of paint each time. So 4 drops of thinner to 4 drops of brush full of paint and mix it with your brush, then pinch on the needle like it's Granny's nipple and pull back the trigger to give it an even better mix. Apply a few layers to have a nice and even coverage, and don't care about the details you might cover at this step, like the different pieces of armor or cloth. Just make sure you cover all the skin this time. As you can see, I went with a desaturated green undercoat, probably using this green a number of times when painting zombie skin. And it works well because green can be the indicator of something rotting or dead. If you ever check your fridge when you forget about a piece of bologna or Granny's toes, man, switching to the cheaper insulin really has its downside. Anyway, once we have a green base tone, it's time to push the values with Karak stone. Now, I'm lying a bit because it's actually grey stone, but believe me guys, these are pretty much the same color. If you have Karak stone, don't buy stone grey unless you really want to. I'm just saying this because some PDF and previous videos have Karak stone in them. I'm adding these to the airbrush cap, but first I add some extra thinner as well, so I can keep the paint thinner ratios all the time. If you only add more paint to your airbrush cap, it's going to clog faster than Granny's arteries from smoking, so don't forget about the thinner or I will slap on your tiny hand. Apply these highlights as light is coming from above and a little bit from the right, and try to obviate adding too much volume to the head. The head is very small and we might lose some contrast in the long run, so curb your trigger movement around that part. On the other areas of the body, you want to add more volume over the chest, shoulders and the back area, creating a gradient which is a little bit lower in value towards the waist, especially if the muscle there doesn't face towards the light source. Now here comes the part that is going to be super scary for some of you guys. I'm going to use a base layer consistency over the airbrush surface with a higher value color, which is pure Karak stone. When we apply some paint with the airbrush, it's never going to be as opaque when we apply it with a brush. If we increase the value, it's going to create a step between the previous and the current highlight that we need to work on. But throughout my teaching years, I learned a couple of things, and one is you guys are terrified of placing highlights with a base layer consistency. The fear has a couple of reasons. One, you have no clue where to place the highlights and what shape you need to paint them as such. Two, you don't understand how light catching different shapes. Now, Papa Laborts will get rid of that fear for you and hold your tiny hand throughout the process, so you can cuddle next to Granny tonight with a calm soul. I want you to watch very carefully how I apply my brush strokes over which surface. Pay close attention, because if you miss this step, you'll be angry and confused throughout the rest of your life, and maybe you do something drastic like stop painting, or worse, you cancel your membership on my Patreon page. And we don't want any of those things, right? Especially the latter. Now, if you have a keen eye, you'll see that all my brush strokes follow the shape of the muscle with the same direction, how the fibers go inside the muscle. It may be new information for some of you, but our muscles are not made of completely solid meat blocks. They are made of some string-like fibers that are connected to your joints. You can touch them and feel them out, but don't get too touchy, if you know what I mean. If you angle your brushstrokes like that, the same way the fibers placed in the muscle, you are like 30% closer to placing nice highlights. Now the other part is the 3D nature of mini painting. When we are painting minis, we have the luxury of basically coloring the miniature without thinking about their structure, like how one limb connects to the torso, how muscles connect to each other. If you guys want to learn how to draw, and you have a structured lessons lined up with the basics, you will be drawing cubes, spheres, and learn about how to draw using the perspective as guide. So you learn about simple shapes, but when it comes to mini painting, we have these awesome sculpts, but we don't have the foundation to understand them if you don't have any art background. But the good part is you don't really need one. We also need to worry about all the sides of the mini we are painting, not just one side, right? It's not a two-dimensional picture when we look at our piece, but a complete sculpture that has to look good from every angle. Like, does it? Because I think this is a false thought process, and here is why. We can't paint a mini that will look exciting and super interesting from every angle, and we don't have to. I'm pretty sure some of you guys are armpit enthusiasts, because let's face it, some of you are pretty weird and keep asking me to send some pictures of Granny's armpit, but believe me guys, it's not that interesting and you don't have to focus areas like that. I tell you which parts are interesting to me on this mini, the head and the muscles. So I'm thinking about how to make those more interesting, but since this video is focused on the skin, we are going to focus on that and the muscles. You need to have a money shot for each miniature that you paint. This is the money shot for this guy. So I composed the highlights in a way that works well. The question is, okay, but how much volume do I need on parts that are less likely in focus? Like the lower half of the mini. Do I leave a dark shadow between the front and the back? And the BS answer is, it's up to you. The more helpful answer is, ask yourself, where is the light coming from? From above and a little bit from the right, okay? That's what we established. If it's coming from above, then you can probably leave darker areas on the lower half of the mini, right? This will also help the composition of the highlights. Also, highlight placement needs to be considered as a part of the composition of your work. You constantly need to ask yourself, where is the light coming from? And use a highlight reference photo. If you don't use a reference when you want to improve yourself or reduce your fear with highlight placement, I guarantee you that you will be always insecure about your process and painting will be a source of frustration instead of being something you can use to unwind and enjoy. I mean, you will get frustrated with other parts and art is the embodiment of frustration, but you can channel this creatively in a good way. If I were about to write a book about my frustration with more lines on PVC miniatures, that would go on forever, but that's not the point. Let's talk about consistency. I know that this base layer consistency is the scariest thing for you guys, and you try to build up your highlights with thin layers all the time, even if it's an airbrush surface or not. You can absolutely build up your highlights with thin layers, but blending everything and glazing your way up to the end of times is only acceptable if you enjoy that it takes you to paint something 10 times more that could be done in a fraction of that time. I like glazing. Glazing is awesome, but as a commission painter, it's not viable all the time. This consistency will force you to get faster and better because you can't hide behind nicely blended highlights if you don't understand the shape under it. Memorize this line. You can't paint what you don't understand. You need to use layering more as a go-to method if you want to get better and faster results. I know all of you want to get faster, but you can't run before you're learning how to walk. This is the baby steps process. So place layers upon each other with the right shaped highlights. And once you're done with that phase, then we can work on the blends. Blending is important, but it's not everything. A well-placed highlight will go a long way than an insecure splotchy section you try to cover up or over highlight. But it's also a nice detail sometimes to have. So to do that, mix some of the previous layer color to our current one and apply it around the highlights. It's the same base layer consistency again. following the shapes of the muscles. If you feel like your fear, anxiety of highlight placement starts to go away slowly, then I'm happy for you. But it's probably gonna take some time and practice. As I was blending the layers, the paint did get more diluted due to the water drops running down the ferrule of my brush. It's important to notice such changes and understand them on the go. And either you rinse off your brush and go for another dip for thicker paint, or do as I do and adapt to these kind of circumstances from time to time and start blending with thin layers. Oh, Papa Labort, you are preaching about being afraid of base layer consistency and now you are thinning paint. That's really cool of you. Totally not hypocrite at all. Yeah, you know, if you have a nice and opaque layer of highlights, it's okay to use thin layers. Like, it's okay to use thin layers anytime, right? I talked about it. I just really recommend you not using thin layers if you use them because you are not comfortable with thicker ones. All right? Don't let just fear of making mistakes lead your hand. Everything works. And sometimes I don't even use fully opaque highlights, but that's usually for my very last highlight over a surface in some cases. And in some cases, I do use thicker maximum value highlights. It all depends on the circumstances. But it's going to take so much more time to get the mid-tone and the first highlight done to have a nice and even opacity without creating a splotchy finish like Granny's teeth with the coffee taints. We really don't want that, and that's the fix for it basically. After that, I do apply some thin layers for some finer blends, but this could be done fast and to a nice finish because, as I said, the layer I'm blending next to is completely opaque. However, Papa Laborts get a case of deuter anomaly, so I can differentiate this green a bit more poorly than an average person that doesn't have this condition. So I'm going to use thin layers rather than thick ones this time. And if you've seen a couple of Papa Laborts videos, it's going to feel very similar because I will be moving my brush from one direction to another consistently to blend in these values more. The other beneficial part of having these opaque layers is that if I miss the section that I think I could that could use more volume, that I can just sketch those real fast and blend them with the rest of the mini without working my way up on the missed parts with numerous thin coats. After that, we push the contrast to make the skin tone paler with Ushabti bone. Same approach as before, so use a base layer consistency and place those highlights inside our previous layer. And you guessed it, we are going to add some Karak tone to the Ushabti bone once we sketch the highlights in our gradient. And of course, you can reverse the process just as well, if that's easier for you. If you are wondering how I can tell where to put these maximum highlights, I mentioned before that I use a highlight reference photo. This will help me to get better results every time if I feel lost, and it really makes me crazy that you guys try to paint volumes out of your heads without any art background. Like, dude, ever heard of Mona Lisa? Do you think Da Vinci painted that just thinking about it? I mean, he could probably pull it off, but no, the chick was sitting there the whole time, so he could look at her, you know? I'm not saying you can't do this without using any reference. You absolutely can. And of course, there are lots of things that you can express in art without using any references like composition, exaggerated accents of light, color. Really, but to know how to bend these rules, you first need to understand the basics, so use references. So with that being said, here are some pointers so you'll never be afraid to paint over an airbrush surface or any surface at all. 1. Use a highlight reference photo. Using references is key. 2. Use more opaque consistency to get you out of your comfort zone if you feel like you stick to thin layers too much. 3. Accept making mistakes and fix them. The third one is where most of you spend the least amount of time. You notice there is something off with your mini, deep down in your heart, I'm sure. You'll be like, okay, I'm going to do better on the next one. Well, maybe you will. But you have some clues that something is not right, but you don't bother to fix it because you are afraid of making it worse. Don't get me wrong, your minis doesn't have to be a masterpiece each time, but please do a checkup round, even if you speed paint. Getting into that habit of that will go a very, very long way. Now, I did use the airbrush in the beginning, and at this point, I'm pretty sure you know, no one can tell which part was done by the airbrush and which part didn't. I mean, you saw the video, so you can probably tell, but you know, I think you guys get what I'm saying. But I also like that the airbrush did save a lot of time creating a smooth transition from the Death World Forest to the almost pure correct stone mix. The first two colors that you apply to your mini regarding their surface are going to take the most time because these are big. And the bigger the mini, the more time it takes to paint. Simple as that. With that, the God Eater Abomination is done, and if you like to see the extended version of the video and access to the PDF guide that covers the entire mini, or you want to paint other miniatures from Vydet or other games, consider joining my Patreon page. A huge thanks to my patrons who support these kind of videos, and with their support I can cover these large Quickstarter games. Special shout out goes to Cold-Blooded Dom, Trying to Paint Minis, Jonathan Mosner, Glishy McCrash, Benoman45, Urtepel21, Michael Kerr, Ramlo, Simon Stefan, and Courtney Hester. I hope your day will be as smooth as a granny's butt cheek.